Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Lee Duckworth, motivational speaker. When I was younger, I believed strength came from being fearless, unshakable, maybe even a little cold. You know, the people who never cry, who never break, who always seem to have it all figured out. But life has a funny way of showing us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it whispers through tears, and sometimes it's born from the very place we think we've been broken beyond repair. Today, I want to tell you about a woman, not just any woman, but the kind whose strength didn't come from having an easy life, but from surviving a painful one. She didn't choose bitterness, she didn't choose to disappear. She chose to rise, not once, but over and over again. She chose strength over sorrow, and that got me thinking, what really makes people resilient? What makes one person crumble under pressure and another rebuild something even stronger from the rubble? The answer, I've come to believe, lies in choices, the small, everyday choices we make between staying in pain or turning it into power, between giving up or getting up. True strength is not the absence of pain, it is the decision to live fully despite it. It's easy to admire strength when it looks like success, when it's wearing a smile, giving a speech, standing tall. But the kind of strength I'm talking about isn't always seen. It's the kind that shows up in silence. It's the strength of waking up in the morning with a broken heart and choosing to try again. It's the quiet voice that says, "I'll find a way," even when the world feels like it's crumbling beneath your feet. We often think strong people are the ones who never feel sadness, who never show vulnerability, but that's a myth. Some of the strongest people I've ever met are the ones who have cried themselves to sleep, who have battled trauma, disappointment, loss, and still showed up the next day. Not because they weren't hurting, but because they made a conscious decision not to let the pain define them. Strength is a decision to carry your scars, not as signs of shame, but as proof that you survived, that you endured, that you are still here. Pain is universal. Every one of us will experience sorrow in some form, a loss, a betrayal, a dream that didn't work out. We can't control that, but what we can control is how we respond to it. We can choose to numb it, avoid it, run from it, or we can choose to face it, to sit with it, to learn from it, and eventually to grow from it. When you choose to live fully despite your pain, you give yourself permission to be whole, not perfect, but whole. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to hide your story. In fact, that story, your story, might be the very thing that lights someone else's path. Because when people see you standing in your truth, not in spite of your pain, but because of how you've carried it, they see what strength really looks like, not polished, not flawless, but real. Strength isn't a one-time achievement. It's not a trophy or a title. It's a daily commitment to keep going, to feel everything fully: joy, sadness, anger, hope, and still choose to engage with life, still choose love, still choose purpose. That's what it means to live fully. That's what it means to be strong. We've talked about strength, not the loud kind, not the one that comes wrapped in medals or applause, but the kind that sits quietly inside a broken soul and says, "Try again." We've talked about resilience, the kind that isn't forged in moments of comfort, but in the fire of loss, in the echo of disappointment, and in the silence of lonely nights. And most of all, we've talked about choice, the choice to feel the sorrow fully, and still, somehow, choose hope anyway. The woman who chose strength over sorrow didn't have a superpower. She wasn't born immune to pain. What she had was the courage to keep moving forward, not because it was easy, but because surrender wasn't the ending she was willing to accept. Her life reminds us that we always have a choice, even when life feels like it's given us none. We can choose bitterness, or we can choose meaning. We can choose fear, or we can choose growth. We can choose to break, or we can choose to build, even with the shattered pieces. You see, sorrow isn't the enemy. Sorrow is the soil, and in that soil, resilience grows if we water it with truth, courage, and even the smallest bit of belief. Belief that our story isn't over. Belief that there is something inside us unshaken, unbreakable, waiting to rise. Some of you listening today may be in your own chapter of sorrow. You may feel stuck, wounded, lost. I won't pretend it's easy, but I will tell you this: you are not alone, and your pain does not disqualify you. In fact, it may be the very thing that prepares you to step into your strength. Because the most powerful people in the world are not the ones who have never fallen, they're the ones who learned how to rise, even when rising felt impossible. So if you take one thing from this message, let it be this: you can still choose strength, you can still choose hope, and in doing so, you don't just survive, you become the woman or the person who transforms sorrow into something sacred. That is real strength, and that strength lives in you.